Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 1% Healthier podcast. Today, I'm joined by Lauren Smith. Lauren is a dietitian that I've been following for a long time and learning from. So I'm super excited to learn from her and chat with her about intuitive eating, especially for active women and how we can approach nutrition and our fitness goals with a healthy relationship with food. So, to introduce you guys to Lauren, I'm going to read her bio, which says Lauren Smith is a registered dietitian, private practice owner, and content creator. Lauren founded Lauren's Balance Bites as an insurance-based virtual private practice that supports clients all over the United States. She's from the Philadelphia suburbs and grew up as a competitive athlete, which greatly impacted her nutrition career. The team at Lauren's Balance Bites works with ages 14 and up and specializes in nutrition for general wellness, sports nutrition, eating disorder recovery, and disordered eating. Whether you are looking to improve your lab work, fuel your performance, or heal your relationship with food, Lauren and her team are here to help. And you can find more about Lauren and her team on social media at Lauren's Balance Bites or at laurensbalancebites.com, which I will have linked in the description. So, Lauren, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Of course. I'm excited to gain insights for myself and learn from you, and also for the listeners to just learn more. And before we dive into questions, can you share a little bit more about your journey to intuitive eating? What got you into being a dietitian?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So, a little bit more about me. I'm currently 29 years old. Like you said, I live in Philadelphia now, but I'm from the Philadelphia suburbs. And a big reason why I became a dietitian is because I was introduced to nutrition when I was like in middle school and high school, just being a competitive soccer player. So, what led me to my career is after I had a pretty intense injury in high school. I think a lot of people can relate to this. I kind of like panicked and was like, oh my gosh, well, what can I control since I can't control being injured? I'm just injured now and I need to figure it out. So I turned to food and it started with like the healthiest of intentions. But at that time, Google and social media, it was not a very healthy place to get nutrition information. It was really extreme, at least what I was reading. And I kind of went down a very slippery slope. And all of the behaviors I developed were definitely normalized, like restricting and compensating with the need once I was recovered to overexercise. And I really just thought I was being normal because it was normalized to me. And I went to school for nutrition, and it wasn't until I started studying to become a dietitian that I realized what I was doing was not normal or healthy or what was being taught to me. So it was very transformative. And then once I finished up my schooling, I did my dietetic internship, and my first job was actually in an eating disorder recovery center. And I had already known about intuitive eating. I had already like really believed intuitive eating, but it really wasn't until my first job in an eating disorder recovery center that I actually like started to learn the nuances of intuitive eating and what healthy eating really is and what it's not. And it's really impacted me personally, but also my career. So it's why I show up the way I show up on social media. And it really is how I live my life now, too.
That's awesome. It's true. It is how you live your life now. And I think that that's cool to see how everything has a reason and a teaching point, and it just adds on to what you're becoming. So that's cool. I also relate to that. If you can't control other aspects of your fitness, then it turns to the food. And it starts with the healthy intentions. It always does. And until it's not. So was there a light bulb moment that you had that you're like, oh, maybe I should change something about what I'm doing?
Well, for me personally, like you said, it starts with the healthiest of intentions. And for a while, I feel like I was just any other normal person who used like my fitness pal, and it didn't really impact me. But over time, when I started to use it more chronically, I started to notice I also developed like binging behaviors and like secretive eating. And I had it was almost like Groundhog's Day, where I kept feeling like the same thing was like happening to me every day, where I would go to high school, come back, I would work out, I would go to practice, and then I would come back from all of that, and I literally would finish like entire boxes of cereal and other containers and would try to throw it out in a different trash can. It was very disordered. And I kept being like, oh, well, you'll be better tomorrow. Like, why'd you do that? And I feel like I finally got to a point where I was just like, this sucks. Like, I don't want to keep doing this. And like I said, I started to learn because I was in high school. I started to learn in college, like why that actually was happening because I thought it was just like willpower at the time. Why can't I just do these things? And why do I feel like I can't stop eating the cereal? And why do I feel like I'm constantly going back to whatever was served to me? But in college, I wouldn't say it was one light bulb moment, but it was really just like a series of little moments that I was like, oh, that's why that was happening. And that's why that still, even in college, sporadically happened. And it didn't all happen at once, but I had to really like get uncomfortable and challenge myself to do things that I had thought for a long time were quote unquote wrong when they were just actually like normal healthy eating. And over time, and that's the scariest part, like you have to get uncomfortable, but over time it was like you start to feel so much better and you're not thinking about food and I wasn't having those moments that's what made it. That's how I was able to stick with that because I just felt physically and mentally pleasant, which is what intuitive eating really is all about.
True. It is. It's about feeling mentally and physically pleasant and content. I think too, when I learned that it was like a more of a self-care framework rather than just a way of eating, that's where I feel like I started to have like mindset shifts because then it wasn't about, well, if I eat this before my workout, then I have to eat less at breakfast. Like it wasn't about like these negotiating and rules. It was more about how did I want to feel? How did I want to perform during a workout? And if it wasn't about how I looked, then what would I do then? And I think that that really helped. Like,
Yeah, so many people I feel like come to us feeling like they're constantly bartering with themselves. Well, if I have this, then I can't have that later. If I do this now, then I have to do this later to make up for that. And it's so normalized. I feel like especially women have these conversations. I'll overhear it like when I go out to lunch. Have these
mhm.
conversations like, "Oh, I'm actually getting the fries because I didn't have any like whatever with breakfast." And it's like, "Oh my gosh, this constant need to justify what we want." When intuitive eating is really just about like honoring, yeah, like what makes you physically feel pleasant and mentally too. And you don't have to be making your choices like piggyback off of all of your other choices. That's actually what leaves you stuck and typically unhealthy.
Mm, true. If your decisions piggyback off each other, then it's just like a constant cycle. Like you're saying earlier, like a groundhog's day. If I overate, then I'm going to undereat. Then I'm going to overeat again and then undereat again.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why it's happening, but we don't realize that this if you continuously make your decisions based on what you just did, then you're just going to continuously do that over and over again.
Well, I would say yes, if the intention is to control the size and shape of your body. Because I do
Yeah.
think where people get wrong with intuitive eating is they do think it's just eating whatever you want, whatever you're in the mood for. And I
Mhm.
know we're going to get more into it, but that's definitely not the case. And you're allowed to be informed. So on social media, this is a big thing that I try to preach with intuitive eating is it's not just eating what you want whenever you want with no regard to nutrition. You can take into account like, okay, what do I have in the fridge? What do I think I'll have later? And you can make an informed decision that's about feeling like physically pleasant and respecting your body. And that's very different than if your goal is to make a decision based off of the rest of the day, trying to control your body. So that's the shift. Like you can still be aware of what the rest of the day will look like or your week, but it's the intention behind it.
That was gold. You can care about like you there's a line you said that you can be intentional, you can be aware without spiraling maybe or like wanting to control so much about it, which I feel like that was a really big breakthrough that I had because I thought that intuitive eating was all about like rejecting any kind of structure. And so then it was more, I'll just eat whatever I want, but then like I didn't feel good. What would you say are like common mistakes when it comes to intuitive eating that you want to talk about like on your page that you share a lot of? Because I know that you do a really good job of that.
Thanks. Yeah, no, people really think intuitive eating is jumping right into it, which is like, yes, at the very like surface level definition, intuitive eating is honoring your body's internal cues, your hunger and your fullness. However, with this big world that we live in that's full of diet culture, there's so many disruptors that all of us were raised with that really take away the ability to understand your internal cues when you grew up with so much like messaging saying, you can't trust your hunger, or you can't eat this, or you can't eat that, or don't eat till this time. So, for someone to try to intuitively eat after maybe being raised in the world that we're living in, or doing a million different diets and thinking that they can just jump into honoring what they're in the mood for, it's an absolute mess. Like it can be really bad. So many people come to us and they're like, "Oh, it's just not for me." Or even on social media, people will be like, intuitive eating's not for me. I would just eat cookies and cakes and donuts and carbs and all these things all day long. And I get it. I'd be like, yeah, because that's not actually how you learn to be an intuitive eater. So when people work with a dietitian who's trained in intuitive eating, you actually do have to have a lot of structure in the beginning and a lot of education and information that you can go through and analyze for yourself as why you are the way you are right now, and how it is a journey of, yes, to one day you can be more attuned to your internal cues, but to get there, you do need education, structure, and guidance so that your body can be in a place where it's equipped and that you know it is giving you those cues accurately. So often when people work with us, like we do have to give them structure of, you should be eating this often or this many meals and snacks, and here's what that can look like. I kind of like to say like that structure, not like a strict meal plan, but really just like you should be eating 3 meals a day and a few snacks is like a cast to a broken bone because it's healing
Mm.
like this wound of you not recognizing, because so many people are like, oh, well, I'm not hungry at that time, so I just won't eat. And it's like, well, it's actually been like 4 hours. And even if you don't feel hungry, if you don't want to continue the cycle of feeling like an absolute crazy person at the end of the day with food, we need to eat at this time, even though you're not hungry, and implement that structure. So that's just one example. But that's a huge mistake that people make, is jumping right into the honoring your cues without recognizing they're not in a place to honor their cues.
That's cool. It's bridging the gap between some like what feels like very opposite is having no intuitive eating structure and like relying on like a calculator to tell you how much to eat, and then learning to trust your body, and you can have that structure. You're allowed to have that to help you like reconnect with your body's cues. I think that's really cool. But that's like the structure that you give. You also mentioned that you help them to figure out why they are the way they are right now. What does that kind of look like? What questions do you ask about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you were to even open up the intuitive eating book, like the first chapter is like rejecting the diet mentality. I think that's how they word it. But really understanding why your thoughts around food are the way they are and where they came from. So, for instance, like one of the very first things we do with a lot of our clients is we'll go through, what foods do you feel maybe guilty or shameful for eating, or you avoid but you enjoy? And a lot of times it's carbohydrates, or carbohydrates that are high in sugar, or different like takeout, or foods that are higher in fat. And we'll go through, okay, what does your brain tell you about those foods? So for instance, a lot of people will say, well, my brain tells me that if I eat carbs that contain high sugar, I will become fat. I will gain weight. And then we go into the nutrition education of, okay, well, what is a carbohydrate, and how many calories per gram are in a carbohydrate, and what do carbohydrates do for our body, and how does weight gain, or how can weight gain actually happen? Because we know that there's not one certain food that can just change the size and shape of your body. It's your behaviors and your habits over time. And this brings up another conversation that really scares people and prevents them from learning to intuitively eat, is this fear of like, well, what will happen to my body? And that's something that we have to address with clients head on, because it's a very valid fear. We live in a very fat phobic world. But the reality is, and why, how I talk through it, at least with clients, is like, if eating in a way that honors your mental and physical health causes you to gain weight, that's weight that you needed to gain. And if eating enough food, meaning like enough of all the foods, enough grains, proteins, fruits, vegetables, healthy fats, fun foods, living your life, causes you to gain weight, that will probably be uncomfortable, but also probably necessary for your health. So that's another thing that's a barrier for people. And I understand some people aren't ready for that potential outcome to happen, but we kind of address that head on too, because that's why a lot of people are scared of certain foods. So to get back to your original question, I figured I'd throw that one in there too.
Mm.
But yeah, that's how it can start.
Yeah. No, I definitely want to address that more too, because it brings up the topic that I wanted to dive more into is our thoughts and behaviors around nutrition, especially when we do care about our fitness goals, we care about our health, we want to be strong, but then when all of our decisions are based on like how we look or the size and shape of our body, then is it really that healthy if we really feel like we have to work so hard to control that? And can it just be easy? Like, can we just be aware and also be free? And because I feel like so many women in fitness, they have kind of like we talked about, is the mindset of, well, if I can't have carbs, should I even eat them? Like, especially if I'm doing workouts, like, what does like nutrition timing look like? How do I find a healthy diet for myself? Or they're afraid of being hungry, or they're afraid of being full. That's another one I hear a lot around. and the advice to like always eat less, work out more, and then like the feeling of having to burn off your calories or earn your food through exercise, that's something I hear all the time. Probably every day if I'm in the gym or if I'm coaching people or even in like the workplace, people talk about, no, I was good today. I can eat that. And I'm like, what? What? Wait. Like, why are we having that kind of verbiage around food? Like, you don't have to earn your food. So I wanted to start to unpack that a little bit. Like, what mistakes do you see people making when they are working towards their fitness goals when it comes to their nutrition? Like, what can we all
I
pull back on?
Before people even embark maybe on a health journey, and what we have clients do is what if you were to be in that land of I'm feeling good, I feel physically pleasant, mentally pleasant, and I know I'm healthy, really defining what that would look like. Because a lot of people don't even know, right? And I feel like especially women, like we're constantly moving the goalpost that you don't even know where you once wanted to be. So in the beginning of the process, if you know like, hey, I want to honor my physical health. I want to get stronger in the gym. I want to eat in a way that makes me feel good and gives my body what it needs. I want to be healthy. You have to actually write out what that means and that looks like for you. And with intuitive eating, where again, so many people struggle, is like their definition growing up might have been of health, might have been tied to size. Oh, they look so good there, it looks so healthy. When it's like, we have to really kind of peel back the layers of what is health really. And our philosophy, and this isn't just intuitive eating, this is also like weight inclusivity and being a weight neutral provider, is that we don't know someone's health just by the size and shape of their body. Like we know your health based off of your lab work, your mental health, how you're physically feeling in your body, your thoughts around food, your behaviors. That's how we can actually analyze someone's health because we all are made up differently. And if it was as easy as if losing weight or being healthy was just as easy as working out more and dieting, like we wouldn't be living in the world that we live in. We live in the world that we live in where people are actually like getting more unhealthy as the years go on because we are looking at the wrong information and we are applying the wrong strategies to health. Sadly, the videos that go viral are the ones that are extreme. You know, me over here on that small corner of the internet, like trying so desperately to make evidence-based nutrition cool and go viral. It's just not cool because it's not glamorous and it's not, it's not promising anything. That's what people want to be promised, which is their weight. So again, like with intuitive eating, you can have goals of I want to get stronger, or I want to lift heavier, or I want to get faster, and I want to eat foods that make my body feel good. Like I want to do all of these things that can exist with intuitive eating. And some people think intuitive eating doesn't mean that those things can exist, but that's wrong. Like they can all exist together. However, if your one goal is just changing the size and shape of your body, you have full autonomy to want to focus on that. But the reason why it doesn't line up with intuitive eating is that you can't honor your cues with that being like your only driver. If your size and shape of your body is your only driver and that's what you are aspiring for, you have to actually not honor a lot of your physical needs to get there. And that's why so many people who become chronic dieters and are chronically trying to shrink the size and shape of their body end up with like yo-yoing and having even worse metabolic outcomes with their lab work, their set point, like their weight fluctuates a lot more. And again, you have full permission to do that. I understand why people pursue that. But it just, some people will try to say, like, oh, well, I intuitively eat for weight loss. And I'm like, oh, it causes like my ears to bleed because that's not
Yeah.
what intuitive eating is.
Yeah. It's really not. How do you, because I know that's a big fear is if you intuitively eat, then all of a sudden, like the size and shape of your body might change. And I'm afraid of what that'll do. And I think that I've talked about it before, like on my podcast, is like, what are you making it mean to live in a different body and to live in a different size body? Well, why are we so afraid of that? And I mean, how do you help people like let go of like the fear of like their body changing?
I mean, I wish that I could say this is exactly what I do. There's not one answer, and it depends on the
Yeah.
person. I mean, we work with people in all sizes and shapes, bodies. So there are people we work with that are in larger bodies, and the conversation can look very different than people who are in what you would call like more straight-sized bodies. Because for the people in larger bodies, and me myself, like I know I have privilege of being in a straight size body, we will have conversations with them that it makes sense that they're scared if they even have like if they gain more weight because they already feel marginalized and they already feel like an outsider, and our world is very fat phobic. And I mean, it's really deep, heavy conversations that you have to have, and it's not us telling them that they need to choose something. It's really us guiding them to like, how do you want to live your life and what's important for you and what's actually healthy for you to live the life that you want to live. That conversation happens with anyone in any sized body, but we also have to recognize what we're asking them to do to maybe realize that we're not doing something just for a physical change is absolutely terrifying. And it can't just be this thing that we don't talk about. And if someone is already in like a marginalized larger body, yeah, this might be really, really hard. And let's actually kind of like make a pros and cons list. If I choose to focus on shrinking the size and shape of my body, or if I choose to honor my mental, physical, and emotional well-being with intuitive eating, what are the pros and the cons? And a lot of times when you list that out with anyone in any sized body, there's always like some cons and some things that you're really scared of, but the pros typically outweigh the cons because it's like, okay, what would my life look like if I wasn't constantly changing my plans because of my thoughts around food and exercise? What would my life look like if I wasn't thinking about food and exercise all the time? What would my life look like for some people if I got my period back? If I stopped getting injured all the time because I was under fueling? These are the deeper questions. And again, it's not saying that the weight change won't be hard, but another really cool thing that I've been able to witness now that I've been doing this for years is like when you actually re-nourish yourself, you soften your thoughts around yourself because your body or your brain can think more clearly. So you might feel, and I validate this for people, that you gaining weight seems like the absolute worst thing that could possibly happen to you. And I'm not saying that it doesn't seem that way and that you're not thinking about it that way, but something that you have to get uncomfortable with and also trust a little bit when you make that pros and cons list is that the way that you think about yourself and you feel about yourself, your thoughts will soften as you start to respect your body, take care of your body, and nourish your body with what it needs, because you can have healthier thoughts. And that's a very, very cool thing to see come to fruition for people when someone will show up in session and be like, yep, you were right. Like, I know that maybe my weight's changed or I have to go up in a jean size, but like, I've never felt better, and I'm able to live my life in alignment with what's important to me. And yeah, so I know I kind of like went a lot of different directions there, but there's not one thing that I can say of like, here's how we address this. It just depends on the person, but there's a couple things that I would say are like general that we'll talk about.
Yeah, that's awesome. I appreciate that. I think that's really gold is making that pros and cons list. I'm sure like the listener might want to do that and just think about what do I actually want and what do I not want? And what are the pros and cons of pursuing one goal over another goal? There's a lot of good things that you'd said
Yeah.
about find because when you're softening your thoughts towards yourself and you respect yourself more, your behaviors start to change because the thoughts that you're
Yeah.
thinking about yourself change. I think that that's a big deal too, as well, is it's not that I'm thinking that I need to change how I look so that I go work out. It's more of I respect my body. I want to feel good in my body, so I'm going to go work out because I'm grateful that I have the body that I do. And I
Yeah,
think,
it is neuro, like the actual term is like neuroplasticity, which is neural rewiring.
mm,
So again, when you have these thoughts of like, oh, I have to go to the gym because I have to burn off what I ate last night. And if you've thought that way your whole life about something, that pathway in your brain is very, very strong. Intuitive eating is at first bringing awareness to what your belief is, where it's coming from, where it stems from. But then, yeah, taking action to do things that are out of respect for your physical and mental health, and over time, pathways will become stronger that are the healthier pathways. So how lucky am I? And it doesn't have to be so cheesy like that, but because sometimes I don't even want to go to the gym, but I go
yeah.
because I know that this is going to help me have a good day and I'm going to feel physically and mentally better to take this time to do this thing for myself. So it's just rewiring your brain for so many different behaviors as to the why behind them. And that's why, again, with intuitive eating, like we have studies and outcomes showing that people who change their relationship to food, really, even if you don't want to call it intuitive eating, if you change your relationship to food, you have more sustainable outcomes with every single behavior change. Nutrition, exercise, sleep, stress management, how much water you drink, because it's more sustainable when you are like respecting yourself and speaking kindly to yourself and you're doing it for a reason that's not just like berating yourself to change the size and shape of your body.
Yes, that's so true. And I've noticed that in my own life is the more that I am more respectful to myself and it started with intuitive eating, it created a ripple effect in other areas of my life. So that is very true. I kind of want to jump into talking more about nutrition in regards to like fitness goals and balancing fueling for performance without slipping into like old diet behaviors or feeling like you want to track again or making sure you're getting enough of this and that, like protein or carbs. How would you go about like eating for performance?
So it depends on the activity that you're doing. So we work with a lot of runners because I think running, so I'll make this specific to running for now. Running is one of those activities that it is a high stress activity on the body. It's elevated heart rate. Your heart rate's in a higher zone. So for runners, a very common thing that we see is if they're training for, let's say, a marathon, they run in the morning, they have then a decrease in their cues because running is a high stress activity that they might not necessarily feel hunger for quite a few hours after that activity. And then later in the day, they become like really ravenous and their hunger kind of like comes through full force. So if I was talking to a runner who's like, okay, how can I fuel for my sport? Kind of similarly with what I said earlier, peeling back, like, what are my current habits? What doesn't feel good? What am I recognizing that is happening a lot to me right now with food, whether it's low energy or feeling like intense cravings around certain food or feeling like a bottomless pit at certain periods of the day and that you just can't stop eating. You kind of have to pinpoint like what doesn't feel pleasant and what doesn't feel good right now, and then see where you can implement structure. So for runners, a lot of times we work with runners who run fasted. And if you're going on a longer run with nothing in your stomach, we might start to say, is there anything that we can start with that maybe feels tolerable before a run, like an applesauce? So what does your pre-workout fueling look like? What does your during workout fueling look like? And what does your post-workout fueling? So just general guidelines. If you're doing like a cardiovascular activity, trying to eat within like 30 to 60 minutes prior to that, something that's just carbohydrates is great standard practice to implement. And then if you're doing like a cardiovascular activity like running and you're going to be running for longer than 45 minutes, you need to bring some intra-run fuel. So that could be something like gels or goos or whatever some people do sweet as fish, like whatever you like. And it depends like how long your run is, like how often you would take that fuel. And that would be not only carbs, but it would be, salt and electrolytes and then fluids. And that would be during your longer run. And then post-run, general rule of thumb is to eat something within an hour after working out that contains mostly protein, but also has carbohydrates. So that could be something like a protein shake, a smoothie that you make with like Greek yogurt or protein powder, or it could be a meal, whatever you can stomach. So for someone who's like, how do I approach my fueling for my running? That would be my general tips I would give in the beginning of recognizing that you're not in a place when you're a runner, especially if you're doing some longer runs, that you can really honor your cues because you're engaging in a physical activity that takes away your cues when your body's recovering. So you have to have structure, you have to have kind of a plan because that is actually self-care in that moment, like honoring your physical needs, even if you don't have the cue for hunger, like you need to eat within an hour of working out for recovery, for injury prevention, and for how you're going to feel throughout the rest of the day.
Yeah, totally. Because I think it's that logical piece too is like you understand that you did just like run for an hour, right? Like your body needs some fuel after that. And even though you're not hungry, you're like right now in this moment, you're gonna be hungry later. And so if you like understand that, I feel like that's also a part of intuitive eating is like actually like the understanding of like logically and like emotionally like needing food and when you're hungry for what. So I think that's a really good way of describing it. When it comes to like other activities, or actually not even like related to a fitness activity, how would you recommend or go about honoring your hunger when you feel like your hunger is just telling you to eat like healthy, unhealthy foods or just healthy foods?
That's a really good question. So let's say you're really, really hungry and there's a part of your brain that's like, I just want to go through the McDonald's drive-through or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. Where it actually start is if a person says to me, like, I feel like I'm just really craving a lot of salt and greasy, delicious fast food. I
Mm-hmm.
would first analyze, well, how often are you eating throughout the day? Because what that person might not recognize, and because it is okay, like you're allowed to get fast food, but again, intuitive eating is about your health, and you might recognize if you were to do that often, you don't feel good, you
Mm-hmm.
know? So, why are you having such intense cravings for those foods? Maybe that person, there's a lot of people that think they're eating enough and they're not. So they might feel like, oh yeah, well, I did eat breakfast and lunch today and I had a snack. And then I might analyze their nutrition. And it's like breakfast was a yogurt with blueberries and lunch was a turkey sandwich. And then they're starving, at 4 o'clock and they want to go through that drive-through. And this is where nutrition education can be so valuable because it's like, well, actually, for that person, they need more than just yogurt and blueberries in the morning. They need yogurt, blueberries, peanut butter, chia seeds, granola, and then they need a sandwich that has a couple of sides and maybe they add avocado and all these. I don't need to get into the nitty gritty, but like there's a reason why they might be having cravings for that higher energy, like fun food more frequently because they don't recognize they're lacking earlier in the day. Now, if someone is on the other end of the spectrum and they're like, like what you said, they're just craving like healthy foods or they only want healthy foods, I want to make sure I answer it right. So, what did you say?
Yeah, like if they feel like they can only have healthy food, so that's all they eat, but then they're unsatisfied or still hungry.
Oh, yeah. And this is something we see all the time. I like to call this like eating around your craving. I was this person where I would be like, I want chocolate fudge brownie, Ben and Jerry's.
Mhm.
And I would feel bad about that because I labeled that as a bad food at one time. So what would I do? I would go have an apple and peanut butter, and then I would go have some cereal, and then I would go have what other healthy snack I had in the pantry at the time. And then guess what I would still do? I would go have the Ben and Jerry's because that's what I really wanted. So a really cool like lesson in intuitive eating is recognizing that like you might realize you're in that pattern of eating around your craving because part of satisfaction is not just physical, it's mental. And that can scare people because they might say, well, then I'd always want the Ben and Jerry's. And I totally understand why people think that. And that's why so many people feel they need to be so controlled. Like, I have to eat the healthy thing because if I start with the unhealthy thing, I'll never stop or I'll always do it. And there might be a period of time where you want that Ben and Jerry's really regularly, but eventually, as you honor your actual needs with your nutrition and even rest and your sleep and your hydration, all these things, there will be a time where that Ben and Jerry's is in the freezer and you kind of forget about it and you don't want it every day. And that's really cool. So for the person who is like, I can only have the healthy thing, we'd have to peel back the layers. Why do you feel like you need to be so controlled? How is that impacting your life? What is your belief right now about how that actually is healthy? Like, why do you think that's healthy? Where is that coming from? All of those things. And then eventually we would get to a place where we would say, like, well, I think you're showing up here for a reason and you're meeting with me because you don't feel good when you don't honor what you actually want. And it leads you to feel then maybe out of control or whatever their feelings are. So it's a lengthy process, but it's very common. So I just want to normalize like both of those scenarios are very common and I don't think they're talked about enough.
I don't think so either. That's why I kind of wanted to talk about them because the mental and physical restriction, when I learned that there was both instead of just the physical, I felt like that was like another like door to open and another breakthrough to have is being mentally satisfied also makes a difference. And that could be the smallest shift as like adding sauce to something or adding cheese to a salad or some texture, some flavor that I wouldn't have normally had because I was trying to restrict in a way. Even though I was like letting myself have like a burger, I wouldn't do it with cheese or something like that. Trying to bargain, like we were talking about earlier.
Mhm.
So I think for anyone that's listening, like understanding that if you struggle with either of those things, like understanding what's going to satisfy you mentally and physically is like another.
Yeah, I always like to call that kind of like fence sitting. When I experienced this myself at one time, where it's like, okay, I'll let myself have the burger, but I just won't have the bun, or I won't have the
Mm.
cheese, or I won't do a burger and fries. So it's kind of like this pseudo, like 1 foot in, 1 foot out of I'll do it to this degree, and it's just another form of control. And I have these conversations all day long. So again, like really normalizing that is your brain trying to protect you. You're trying to implement this control because that makes it feel less scary. But ultimately, I also like to use the analogy like you kind of then feel like a parked car and you're just like sitting in a parking lot, not going anywhere. And that doesn't feel good. You get to that place where it's like, okay, I'm not going forward. I'm not going backwards. I'm just parked here in this place where I'm not even like happy. Like the one part of my brain's not happy and the other part of my brain's not happy because I'm just trying to do this thing and very make it my own when it's like it's not in alignment, really. It's not getting you where you want to go. But there's a reason that people do that. And it's because it's your brain trying to bring you comfort and control and say, we'll slowly tiptoe into this and we can normalize that. And maybe you need to do that for a while, but recognize that eventually that becomes uncomfortable because you're not making a choice one way or the
Mm.
other.
That's so true. Because it's your brain that's trying to make you feel comfortable because you've been so used to controlling for so long that trying to let go of that for even like a little bit is so like that pseudo control that you're talking about. Yeah, I've lived there for a long time. So,
Same.
but it's true. You're gonna get to a point where it's like you let yourself have the regular burger and the fries, and then you realize it's not that special, and it's like, it's okay if I want it and if I don't. It's
Yeah, we need to remove it from the
neutral.
pedestal.
Yeah, removing it from the pedestal and making it neutral is not like a good or bad thing. You're not doing a good or bad thing by ordering a salad. It's just a salad. You're not doing a good or bad thing by ordering a burger. It's just a burger. So.
Exactly.
And one of my other questions was like when it comes to like women specifically, how do you help us like navigate hunger around your menstrual cycle? Because I know a lot of people, like a lot of women, like notice like different cravings or hunger around their period, but I sometimes I notice that, sometimes I don't. How do you navigate that or work through that?
Yeah. And again, this is like such a common question with intuitive eating because people will be like, I could not honor my hunger because sometimes I'm like a bottomless pit. And I always like to say, like, you're not a robot. And this is like male or female, but like for females
Yeah.
specifically, like around your menstrual cycle, your body is doing all these internal things that you don't see. It has a lot of things that's doing behind the scenes to prepare to have your period. And I believe I learned, I think the class was like nutrition across the lifespan, but it said something like, the 3 to 5 days before your period and the first 3 days of your period, something like that, the average female burns 400 calories more per day during that time for your body to prepare to
Hmm.
have a menstrual cycle. And again, like I want to use that number loosely because it's like, what is the average body? But this was just what's in the textbooks. So like bear with me. But even hearing that, regardless of what your weight is, what your height is, just know your body is doing a lot behind the scenes. That's why you might feel more fatigued. You feel like you maybe you did a workout like a week prior that felt really good. You do the same workout before your period and you can feel like absolute shit because your body is doing a lot behind the scenes. So just to give you like permission and education, if you need more rest before your period and if you're hungrier before your period, it's because your body is doing more for you and it's a temporary time where you might need more. So that again is part of the intuitive eating philosophy, recognizing that if you're hungrier for a period of time, honor it and then you'll actually feel better afterwards because your hunger will then regulate again to whatever your normal looks like for you. But so many women are so hesitant to honor any more hunger, but they're always happy to honor when they feel less hungry. And to really be attuned with your health, it goes both ways. Sometimes you're going to be more hungry, sometimes you're going to be less hungry. And if we can get to a place where you aren't like judging one so critically, the whole world would be happier.
Wow. That was a really deep thing that you said that women are very reluctant to honor more hunger, but very willing to honor less.
Yep.
That's crazy, but I know that's so true. And I think that when we give ourselves the permission, like when you trust that your body knows what it's doing, your body knows that there's a lot going on behind the scenes, like it's okay. There's probably a reason for that. And I think that when I started to embrace that more, it makes me appreciate my future a little bit more because I know if I'm gonna be like in the future ever pregnant, like I want to be able to have a healthy relationship with food and honor hunger at that point because I'm not just eating for myself anymore. Like I'm growing a human. Like I have my body's doing things and I can honor that without trying so hard to not be hungry. So,
Yeah. I mean, we have so many women that come to us saying, and maybe they're like moms of young kids, and they'll be like, the only time in my life where I actually felt good with food was when I was pregnant. And I always say, how funny is that? Because guess what? That's the one time in your life where you are really, like, you're creating another life, right? It's like a miracle, and you're removing your nutrition being just about yourself. Like you're thinking about this baby that you're growing and like you give yourself permission to be like, well, yeah, I need the food because of this baby. And then after you give birth and you're in postpartum, those thoughts can flood back in if you haven't healed them
mhm.
prior to pregnancy. So I actually think it's really beautiful when so many parents or moms work with us because they're like, okay, this is disrupting my life and now I also have a child and I'm extra busy. I want to be able to like work through this, not only for themselves to feel better, but also it will help them with how they talk about food with their kids. So if people can do this work even before they're pregnant, I think that's amazing. But even if you're someone who's already postpartum and you're still struggling with this, or whatever age, my oldest client's like 80 years old, it's never too late to
Oh,
change your relationship to food and your thoughts around food.
that's so wholesome. That's true. It's never too late. Like you can think whether you've been in it for struggling or recognizing that you struggled for months or years and decades, it's never too late because you deserve a better life,
A
a
thousand
happier life.
percent. And shout out to my 80-year-old client because she always tells me, she's like, tell people about me. Tell them
Oh,
that if I could go back, I would do this sooner. But she's so happy she's doing it now. So I have to say that and shout her out because it is the sweetest thing ever.
that is seriously so sweet because she's taking the time to realize that she can be healthier. Like it's one of those things where you're never too good to get better and you can be stubborn for probably 80 years of your life and then realize, you know what? Maybe there's a better way of living for me and I'm open to that. Like
A
being
thousand
open.
percent. I mean, I like to say intuitive eating is about honoring like your health span, like helping you have the healthiest health span. So I don't know if people know what that means, but your health span is not like necessarily the years in your life, but how healthy you are in the years that you live, meaning like how long can you be independent? How long can you be mobile? How long are you cognitively like aware of what's happening? Because there's a lot of people who can live long lives, but when they aren't honoring their health or they're not doing like health promoting behaviors, you can live until 100, but you could have been really chronically ill from the time that you're 70. And yeah, so for this client specifically, something we talk about is like how can you maintain like the healthiest health span even while you're already 80 until however long she ends up living, because that really is what intuitive eating does. It's about honoring your health and helping you have healthy behaviors that can help you potentially have the longest, healthiest health span. And I much rather, that's what I strive for. I don't need to live to 100, but if I can live to 90 or 85 or whatever it is, and I can be healthy for most of those years and independent, that's what's important to me. And that's also, of course, what I want for all the people I work with too.
Yeah. I like that idea, the health span, like living your healthiest in the years that you're given, not just like living the longest possible.
Hmm.
I love that. To wrap up, one of my questions along these same lines is if someone is listening and they like feel like they should change, but there's that resistance of I don't know if I should. I don't know if it's going to actually help me because I'm scared or whatever like the fear is. But like deep down they know they want to have a better relationship with food, a better relationship with their body. What can be their stepping stones?
Oh, I love this question. The thing that first comes to mind for me is recognizing that this is about more than the food and it is about more than your body. So a lot of clients we work with also have a therapist, but something you talk about both in therapy and with your dietitian is what unmet need or what was happening in my life when this happened with my relationship to food, when I became more controlling, when I became more rigid, like what other areas of my life maybe were really stressful that caused this control to feel like a good distraction. And again, it can start with the healthiest of intentions. And there is this video on YouTube. It's honestly filmed so long ago, but I still refer back to it. It's called The Log. And essentially, you think of yourself like floating down a river, hanging onto a log, and the log is your buoy. Okay. And you have to think about your disordered relationship with food is that log. It was buoying you down this river and distracting you and giving you like peace from other outside things that you felt like you couldn't change, or they seemed like you almost needed a distraction from them because there was nothing you could do with them. So you hang on to this log. There reaches a point when you get to the end of the river and you're like, this log, I don't want to be on this log anymore. Like, I don't want this thing anymore. It's not serving its purpose anymore. So, for someone's listening who's like, what should I do? I'm like in between a rock and a hard place. I don't know what to do. I would actually first analyze like what was it buoying you from? And if it feels uncomfortable now, maybe that other part of your life is more healed now. And you can recognize like maybe it's not serving the purpose it once was, or even if it still is there any other like healthier behaviors that like honor and respect your body that we can change out, that for slowly but surely. So I know that's not like a super specific answer, but that's how I would actually have people start, because you could start with all the food stuff, but if you don't know like the behind the scenes of why your thoughts are the way they are and what purpose they once served, it's going to be really hard. So you could look at that YouTube video, but I promise you, it's not great quality, but it has a good message.
I'll try and find it. Maybe I'll link it in the description.
Yeah,
But
I can show it to you.
okay, that'd be perfect. Because I think when you really get honest with yourself and you ask yourself if food wasn't to blame, if my body wasn't to blame, then what would be left? And like getting honest with it, like, why did that come up in the first place? Like, why did I feel like if maybe it was work that was so stressful or family life or friends or relationships or just emotions, that was how I was dealing with it, then once you start addressing that, then maybe.
Yeah, it's like a big identity piece. One other like exercise I'll give people to do that and I have a lot of clients do this is text like your best friends or your best friend or your family and say, what do you like about me? Like, what are characteristics that you would tell people I have? That's why we're friends. Because so much of your disordered relationship to food, people really will say to me, like, Lauren, like, I don't know who I am if I'm not the girl who's in the gym, if I'm not the girl who's like eating clean. It's like such an identity thing. And that gets more into the therapy end of things. But like anybody can do this exercise where if you're again deciding, do I want to have freedom with food? Do I want to have freedom with exercise and the thoughts that you have? And if you're scared of, well, who am I really? Your best friends are not friends with you because you're just the girl in the gym and eating clean. Like it can be such like a healthy exercise for people to do. And it's also really sweet for someone to be like, oh, like I'm friends with you because you're really loyal and you always make me feel seen or whatever they say. That helps you remove yourself from, again, why are we here? What is my purpose? And how is this actually like causing me to be out of alignment with what I really want for my life?
That's really sweet. That is a really good exercise, especially if you need a little boost or if you're struggling to see your value that you bring besides just the habits that you share. So it's really good. Okay, Lauren, I've got two more questions for you. The first one is what is one empowering belief that you'd want women to adopt about food and fueling their bodies, especially if they're active?
Okay, I'll say a phrase. Your whole life shrinks when you focus on shrinking your body. So I don't know if that's necessarily like empowering, but I think it's a good reality check because so many women really do feel like everything, oh, I'll get the job, I'll get the boyfriend, I'll get the this, I'll get the that when I like achieve my dream body. But the only thing that focusing on shrinking your body gives you is it really shrinks your whole world. So I think that can be empowering, even though that's a sad thing to say.
I love that because it's a good reminder bringing you to reality. Your whole life shrinks when you focus on just shrinking your body. So that's good. I like that one. Okay, and then my last question for you, Lauren, is what does 1% healthier mean to you?
I would say like living your life in alignment.
I love that.
Yeah, it's short and sweet, but like you are healthier if you are doing things that helps you live the life that you want to live and if you're aligned. So that can look different for everyone, but you will be healthier for it if you're doing the things that make you feel good.
Wow, that's beautiful. That's actually really sweet that you share that because that's what I'm trying to work on, like personally, is living my life in alignment. So that's really sweet that you shared that. That's awesome.
Yay! Of course, thank you.
Of course. Well, thank you so much for your insights on intuitive eating and healthy relationship with food and how we can navigate that, especially when we are people that want to be fit and be strong, but remove the size and shape of our body from our worth and how we treat food and how we treat exercise. So, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate everything that you shared today.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. And if you guys want to connect more with Lauren, I will put the links to connect with her in the description box below. But otherwise, again, thank you so much, and we will see you in the next episode. Bye.